Our session today, as you all know, will explore how we help our end user departments better navigate sourcing, including by accessing the benefits of cooperative procurement. And as I promised, want to give everyone a chance to introduce themselves. So, April, can you start us off?
Sure. Good morning or afternoon, wherever you are. My name is April Marin. I'm the Executive Director of Contracts, Procurement, and Risk Management at the Santa Clarita Community College District, also known as College of the Canyons, in Southern California, about 45 minutes north of Los Angeles on a good day with traffic, right by Magic Mountain. I've been doing contracts for over 20 years now. I'm one of those crazy people who love words. And I've been with the Santa Clarita Community College District for about 15 years now.
Awesome. Thanks,
Thanks.
April. Jen, over to you.
I'm not sure how to follow that. That's awesome, April. I'm Jen Myers, the purchasing director at the City of Scottsdale. I've been in procurement for about 13, 14 years now. Started my career at the City of Tucson before coming over to the City of Scottsdale. And I also serve as the Talent Council Chair-elect on NIGP's Talent Council Board, and I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. And I want to say an extra thank you to Dan and his team over at Sourcewell for co-hosting today's webinar with us. Many folks that are joining probably have already heard of Sourcewell at some point, but you may not yet know the breadth of work that Sourcewell does to support the public procurement community. So, for example, hosting educational webinars like this one. Dan, want to introduce yourself and also say a few words about Sourcewell and how you all support public agencies and their suppliers before we dive in?
Oh, yeah, thank you so much. My name is Dan Marin. I just realized that I pronounced it the same way that April pronounces her last name, just spells it differently. I am a director of government accounts with Sourcewell. I've been there for 2.5 years now. I'll talk about what we do in government accounts. But before that, in terms of this audience, recognizing this mostly public procurement folks, before I came to Sourcewell, I was a public purchasing agent for the previous 25 years in agencies in Nevada and California. Most recently, the city of Sparks, Nevada, for 18 years as the contracts and risk manager. So I've been where you have been in the profession, and am very happy to be here. With respect to Sourcewell, the only thing that I like to highlight to procurement audiences when I get the opportunity, because I've lived both sides of it, is pointing out, you see the banner behind me that we're government helping government. And that may come off as a marketing tagline, but it's important for me to point out because a lot of folks in the purchasing profession don't recognize the fact that Sourcewell, while looking very much like a commercial vendor in this space, Sourcewell is a government agency. We are what's known as a service cooperative in the state of Minnesota, and the purpose of the service cooperative is to assist local governments in our region of the state. There's a 5-county region that we support through a number of initiatives, but the way we do that is through our cooperative purchasing program. That's how we collect revenue, because while the state established service cooperatives, they didn't give them any revenue train or any authority to tax or to go into debt. So they had to find their own way to generate revenues, and they do that through the cooperative purchasing program. And while the initial mission and still primary mission today is to invest in that 5-county region of Minnesota, we've taken the additional step of looking to better serve the professions that are out there in the world needing assistance, and public procurement is amongst them. If anyone's ever attended NIGP Forum, you'll see Sourcewell's name in a lot of spaces as a listed government partner to those events. And we do that mostly through the funding of scholarship programs. So if you've ever applied or considered applying for scholarships via NIGP, that is one way that we help support the profession. We're going further. My role at Sourcewell today is, again, Director of Government Accounts, but my focus is on training and engagement, both for our internal team, but also going out to purchasing audiences, whether it's chapters or purchasing groups, and offering training and resources to those folks that are needing assistance but don't necessarily have the financial resources to buy them themselves. And so that it's a long way around to saying, again, Sourcewell is very happy to participate today with Pavilion in this endeavor because it's right along with the mission of what we do day to day.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dan. And I'm Marielle Reed. I'm also a former public servant. I served with the City and County of San Francisco and now founder and CEO here at Pavilion. And for those that are new to Pavilion, we provide free tools to support procurement teams, source vendors, get compliant quotes, and empower their departments. And for the last few years, procurement teams have really used Pavilion to find and use cooperative contracts all in one place for free. And while you can still use Pavilion to do that, thanks to the work that we've done with dozens of other procurement leaders, including a few here today, we've recently launched some new features that are still free but go beyond cooperative procurement to really empower public procurement teams to work more strategically and deliver a better experience for your end user departments as well. So I'm going to share a sneak peek at some of those updates in just a moment. But before we do that, some of you, when you joined, answered a poll that we had. So we're going to pull that up. We've introduced ourselves, but we'd love a chance to get to know you a little bit as well. So let's go ahead and share some of the results of that poll. Just switching over. Okay, here we go. Okay, so we asked, where are you coming from? And here's what you said. So it looks like pretty good spread across the country. All right, next we asked, where do you work? So it looks like we have a good mix of agencies, some suppliers, a lot of cities or counties represented, which is great. And then we wanted to know what would be most helpful for you today. So it sounds like taking a look at some of the tools that others are using, hearing from your peers, getting some advice around how to explain cooperative contracts, and also how to support your departments in training, which is great. Yes, and if you do have other questions, please feel free to drop those in the chat. As a matter of housekeeping, this webinar is being recorded, and so I will start that now. It is now being recorded, and so we'll be able to share this webinar recording with everyone who registered after the fact. And then also, if you do have questions, we're going to try to leave some time at the very end, but feel free to add questions. There's a Q&A feature on Zoom, or you can drop them in the chat, and our team is monitoring them as well. So please chime in. We'd love to hear what's resonating also for you. Feel free to share some of your experience too as we go along. Okay. So very quickly, I just want to share a little bit of context on today's conversation. And it really starts with feedback that we at the Pavilion, at Pavilion had been hearing from many of the procurement teams that we serve on where they were enjoying what we built together and where they needed kind of a little bit more help. And the problem that they expressed was oftentimes a sense of feeling stuck in reactive mode, cleaning up compliance issues with their departments. And so we dug in to learn more from these agencies. We actually interviewed dozens of public procurement teams from across the country, and we went deep. We went on site with 5 entities who participated in a much more expansive research program. They gave us access to interviewing their procurement teams, their end user departments. And I'm going to summarize what we heard from this research, but as I share some of these pain points, if any of them resonate with you, again, please feel free to chime in to the chat and share. I'd love to hear about your experience as well. Okay, so the first takeaway from the research that we did was this reflection that procurement teams know how essential compliance is, but they're often working with department users who don't know or care enough about procurement compliance. And many of the teams we spoke with really try and help support their departments. They provide trainings, they provide policy cheat sheets. Here's one from the city of Santa Cruz, which was awesome. But the departments still struggle, and procurement also has trouble intervening early on in the procurement cycle with their end user departments, mostly because procurement policy and compliance is just not top of mind for these users. They're not experts in procurement the same way that procurement teams are, and they just want to get what they need and get it done quickly, and they oftentimes can take the wrong steps to do that without knowing it. The second thing we heard is that procurement teams often discover errors or missteps when they're most time-intensive, most costly in terms of relationships to fix. So we saw that often end users get started on a process and procurement teams have to jump in to correct errors later on instead of being partners from the very beginning. So maybe this resonates. I know it does with our panelists, but we heard from many teams things like, I wish I'd been brought in earlier, or I wish I didn't always have to be the bad guy in that dynamic, or, I hate being the department of no. And so if you've ever felt this, you're definitely not alone. This was a really common pain point among the agencies that we interviewed. And then the third thing that we heard is we heard from procurement teams that really want to help and apply their expertise proactively, but feel overworked and underwater, mostly cleaning up things that are going wrong. So many of you, I know we were talking about it even before the chat, have meetings with your department users or other things where you're kind of coming down as the hammer and saying, no, you can't do it this way. And you're putting out a fire, you're fixing something that's gone off the rails. And many teams said that they're fixing what feel like immediate compliance problems or oversights, and that these seemingly preventable issues really strain the limited time and resources of their team. So it kind of felt like we all kind of know what needs to be done to avoid the problems, but we're too busy stuck fixing the problems that are on fire, sometimes to take a step back and have the energy, the headspace, the calm and quiet to put those new structures in place. So when we heard these pain points at Pavilion, we felt excited because we said, okay, here's an opportunity to help. And our North Star is and always has been building free tools that empower public procurement professionals to do the work that delivers value for our broader communities, and that hasn't changed. But our product experience has changed because we've now updated the platform, again, in large part, and thanks to folks like Jen and April who have contributed with their feedback around being able to serve those pain points that the teams that we interviewed reflected. And so we've been building new features that really help procurement teams go from feeling like the bottleneck to being more of a strategic partner, setting departments up to source and get quotes compliantly and on the right purchasing path without having to be procurement experts themselves. So April and Jen are going to share a little bit more about how their teams are using that new experience to empower their departments in just a minute. And I'll share a very quick overview of what's changed and a snapshot as well, just so you have an orientation to it. So at a very high level, I think Pavilion now seeks to be the best place for public agencies to find and connect with vendors that automatically meet your scope and agency's specific compliance requirements. So we've made really big investments in our sourcing experience. We now have more than 300,000 vendors, and we're working hard to collect information that public servants care about, specifically for public servants about those vendors. We've made it super easy to get quotes from vendors across purchasing paths, whether that's your own contracts, getting informal quotes, or cooperative contracts as well. And then we help you set your departments up for success from the beginning. So when they come to Pavilion, they see just the vendors they can work with on the right purchasing path. Again, whether that's using your own contract, getting informal quotes, or using a cooperative contract. And then the procurement team gets visibility into those purchases, audit-ready documentation and reporting, including savings reports, which are coming very soon, that you can use to demonstrate the value of procurement and your purchasing process. What hasn't changed? Still free for public agencies. You can still find and contact cooperative awarded suppliers in Pavilion. You can still do things like look up vendors who are on those awarded contracts easily as well. So here's quickly what it looks like. Departments just enter what they need to buy. Pavilion guides them step by step, targeting common complaints that we heard from departments and common errors that they make to set them up for success the next time they come to procurement with a request. And then we tap into our database of vendors out there, and including our database of cooperative contracts as well. So departments are matched with suppliers who are going to sell what they need and also have the right compliance infrastructure in place, whether that's a cooperative contract or maybe if it's under threshold, they can just get informal quotes. And we give short tips to departments along the way to keep them on track as well. And so when an existing contractor or cooperative covers the scope of work and also meets your agency's compliance requirements, we're automatically recommending it to the department. And then if nothing's available, we can help them get quotes or connect to other systems for a formal solicitation. So all departments need to do is click a button, watch the suppliers come in here. This is a trigger that sends an email. So the work is happening in your inboxes, but after the departments have selected suppliers that they'd like to reach out to, they send emails one-on-one through Pavilion, and then we're basically following those emails so we can put everything in one exportable PDF that's requisition ready. So no more digging through the email inbox to kind of put everything in one place. And then when the departments are also selecting the suppliers to invite, we basically handle the rest. So we're tracking down the best points of contact on the back end from each supplier. We're asking them to reference their existing cooperative contract on the quote if that's required. And then we're following up with them to make sure that they respond quickly. So basically that means that end users are getting the right number of quotes with all the documentation they need to get approval ready to go. And like I said, there's that audit ready copy of all communication with each supplier that's contacted, and the contract documents, everything like that, bundled into one PDF that's ready to go to your system for submitting requisitions. And then coming very soon, we are starting to automatically calculate cost savings for you as well. So one of the things we heard is like, hey, we want to reinforce with departments that getting quotes when it comes to informal quoting or Comparing cooperatives is different suppliers on cooperative vehicles is a good practice and a benefit. How do we kind of show them that benefit? And so we're starting to collect data around cost avoidance and cost savings that we'll be able to report out. So you, as the procurement team, can reinforce those best practices with your departments, and then also have numbers to show and take back to your electeds, to your leadership, as well, about the value that procurement is bringing in by running those processes. Okay. So that was Pavilion's approach to addressing common bottlenecks that departments run into or create in the procurement process, shaped by some of today's panelists. And I want to now turn it over to our panel discussion and hear how April, Jen, and Dan have used these tools, really helped build these tools, and others to set their teams and departments up for success. So to start us off, this is something we heard a lot. Departments are trying to get around procurement. They're trying to shortcut the purchasing process. What's the most common reason that departments try to bypass or shortcut the process? And how have each of you handled it? So April, we'll start with you.
The most common reason people try to bypass procurement, I have to say, is that we slow things down. Compliance does take a little bit more time. So unfortunately, that's kind of the reputation that I think a lot of procurement departments gets built for them. I'll get calls, someone will just call me and say, hey, April, I heard procurement's holding things up. Why are they holding up this request? When really if they know us, we aren't the ones holding up their request. Usually it's something else that somebody else hasn't quite done yet, that maybe they just need a little hand holding. So I think, just that procurement causes delays, but if they build that relationship with us, then they wouldn't think that. They only say that because they don't have the relationship with us. Because if they were contacting us and keeping us in the loop and really reaching out for help, we could speed things up really quickly for them.
Yeah, I love this because it's one of the common kind of misconceptions around, I think of it as like, let me be your wing woman. It's like, I'm going to help you get what you need. We're going to be a great team. But so often, and we heard this too, departments try to avoid procurement. And ironically, that creates this negative feedback loop of, because they did the wrong thing, because they avoided it, now we do have to come in and kind of be the bad guy and slow things down. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Jen, what's been your experience here?
So similar to April, is also, we don't have time for your process. The other thing is that we see is people want a specific vendor, right? And we don't want to work with anyone else. We just want this vendor. How can we find them? And we'll go do our own research, or this is a sole source when really it's not. And so that's probably one of the biggest things that we see, is that we got to work with this vendor. How can we work with this vendor? And so they just try to bypass us and say, oh, nope, here you go. Here's our sole source, which, as many of us know, is not generally a sole source. There's usually lots of people out there. So I would say we see that a lot.
Totally. Yeah, I think this is a common one that we hear as well, of like, how do we stop the sole source? Sole source is not the answer for everything. Okay, Dan, how about you? What's been your
purchasing, procurement, however you label yourself, you are positioned as the regulator for the agency. And so the fact is, as a regulator, no matter how efficient you try to be, you are going to affect the speed of business. Now, the key in that is, in my experience in other agencies, is we waded into it. We are regulators, but we want to be positioned as a consultant in the process as well. And so you look for those opportunities with your customer base, whatever department it is, where if you have a successful encounter with them and they, I've had this happen before where someone in the fire department says, wow, that went a lot better than I thought it would. We'd heard horrible things about purchasing, but that went so much better. You actually add to the process. Thank you so much. And my tag on to them always was, hey, that's great. I'm glad you feel that way. Please go tell a friend, and use that word of mouth marketing within the organization, within the fire department, within greater public safety, across the city in this case. I'm entertained by one of the previous slides where we're talking about getting bogged down in answering people's questions. For my view, purchasing is the one that has to know all the procurement rules. Our clients don't. Your clients don't, and there's no reason that they need to outside of very broad strokes. And so, again, trying to position yourself as a consultant helps you with that, because if they come to you and say, well, I'm trying to buy this, how do I do it? If you can offer them multiple paths, knowing that rule set that you should be the most familiar with in your organization gets you on that road to consultancy. I recall one networking session at NIGP where I heard somebody sitting behind me in one of those group forums saying, "Gosh, it'd be great if they just would stop calling me and asking me the same question over and over again." And I turned to this person, I said, "That's nice, but if they knew all the answers, they wouldn't need you."
Mm.
And you play a role, and you do have to answer those same questions over and over again because once they know everything about your job, yeah, they've got every right to try and get around you. They're going to try really hard, even harder. So, just another take.
Yeah. No, I think what we heard is the departments don't want your job, but they do want to they want to pass your tests. They want to sail through without having to become experts themselves. So I think that's a pain point a lot. I think of it as a toddler mom oftentimes of like we're kind of pitching vegetables to our departments, right? We're like, eat your vegetables, compliance with the vegetables. So how do we zhuzh up the veggies? We can try to pack them into something like a muffin or a cupcake, or we can talk about sort of the benefits, or do both. But ultimately, we have kind of different incentives and different roles to play. Awesome. Well, curious to have each of you walk us through your decision tree. I think this is something that different procurement organizations can have different processes here, and I know it's something that oftentimes boggles both departments, but also suppliers that are trying to partner with agencies as well. So purchase request comes in from your department. What factors determine whether you point that department towards using a cooperative contract or getting informal quotes or doing a formal competitive bid or solicitation? Jen, why don't we start with you this time?
All right. So ours can be very political, sometimes driven. If our mayor and council are very big on local business, so sometimes that can point us in one direction or another. And timing, of course, as we, April and I both mentioned, if the turnaround is yesterday, we're probably not going to put out a solicitation for that process to, get a contract award. We're going to go straight to looking at a piggyback. But other things that might, weigh into that is even pricing too, is, using the pavilion tool is actually one of the things that we rolled out recently that has been helpful to that, to help people say like, oh, I can get quotes and still go through a process and still be compliant, or find a local vendor within, what cooperatives are already available from agencies in the valley, whatever that might entail. So it really depends on what is that driving factor. Is it timing? Is it price? Is it, local, politically driven? Those things kind of help shape what direction we go.
Awesome. April, how about you? What's been your experience?
So we try to use piggybacks on almost every purchase that we can. It's just a time saver for everybody. And if we can educate our end users in that when we're looking at aggregate purchase amounts, are we going to be hitting these bid thresholds? Maybe not in the first month of the fiscal year, or the calendar year, whichever you're on. But towards the end, we might have to, do a formal bid if you don't start with those piggybackable contracts right at the beginning. We keep a repository of our piggybackable contracts and cooperative agreements that are already vetted. We have a vetting checklist. So that we can go and look in our repository to see, but also I think Pavilion has become, we're still kind of a little new to Pavilion, but it's becoming a really great way for our end users to check to see if they do have those piggybackable contracts available, as well as for my staff and my buyers to find these piggybackable or cooperative agreements. It's the time saving is just something that is incredibly important for my end users. I'm sure your end users as well would feel that way. If I have to tell someone, I'm sorry, slow down, and I need 3 to 4 months because I need to do a formal solicitation, it's not going to go over well politically. But if we have those existing contracts already set up, and they're searchable by my end users in easy fashion, that's going to definitely promote usage of them. The other issue is educating my vendors. Sometimes they don't even know what a cooperative agreement is, or a piggyback agreement is. They don't know how to access them. They don't know if they have them. So, I've had to have some, conversations in the past with my actual vendors and say, have you ever heard of Sourcewell? And they go, oh yeah, we're on that. I go, oh great. Why don't we give me a quote under Sourcewell, please? So yeah, I think that's why we really try to drive those contracts just right off the bat, right at the beginning.
Yeah. April, super interesting point that I just want to double click into or expand a little bit on for those that are listening, because it is something that I think confuses both departments and vendors. But if I'm understanding you right, you're saying, hey, we actually prefer to have a piggybackable contract in place from the start, even if, by policy, it's maybe an informal quote that's required, because we reach a threshold and that's going to be a trigger that will trip up that department where it's like all of a sudden we have to come down with the hammer. The threshold's been crossed. There's kind of this invisible boundary or barrier where all of a sudden we come down and we have to say, oh no, now we have to go out to bid or put a contract in place, and maybe you can't keep working with that same vendor. So that is something we see at different agencies, and it does cause kind of puzzlement sometimes with the departments. We're like, wait, I thought it's under this threshold. I can just go out and get 3 quotes. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's a point of confusion that we see that comes up quite a bit.
Yeah, I prefer to avoid being the hammer. Let's not be a hammer. Let's just not even bring the hammer into the picture. Let's just start right from the bat.
Words to live by. Okay, Dan, and how about you? What was your experience here?
Yeah, my experience there was all about timing and available resources. Because once you cut through the desire of every customer out there to say, yeah, I want it tomorrow, figuring out what the real timeline is and say, okay, well, the real thing is they need it in a month. How can I do it that quickly? Or even if it's further out, you look at your available resources. Do I have the team in the procurement shop to be able to put together my own solicitation? You may not. My last organization I came from, when I started in 2005, I had 4 people. By the time I left, it was myself, and that was it. And so I got to the position of training my client departments, the public works manager, the fleet manager, etc. Hey team, if you can find a cooperative and you can bring that forward, if you can find a cooperative that meets your needs, it gives you the brand and flavor that you want and the prices within your budget, you don't even need to talk to purchasing. Take it straight to the city council for approval, referencing the fact that you're joining onto a contract, a cooperative or a state, whatever it may be. Reference the correct piece of state law, and here it is, copy and paste. And you don't need to talk to purchasing. If you check those boxes, off we go. And that got them very well trained, because they too don't want to go through a long, mysterious bidding process where you don't know who's going to show up on bid day or what products they're going to represent. If they can get predictability of product, predictability of price, and satisfy the legal requirements, they're more than happy to take those steps. Now, that was for the existing team. Whenever I'd have someone come at me with an oddball purchase, something highly specialized, and this most often happened from the public safety folks. The police and the fire departments would go to their industry trade shows and go, yeah, that's the perfect toy. We need one of those. And they'd show up in purchasing and say, well, we'd like to spec only that one. And my answer typically back was, all right, your supplier that you're talking to is only selling to police and fire departments. What do they have in common? They're all government agencies. If they've sold one of them, they have a contract with a public agency out there. They might even have a cooperative. Ask them that question, because that'll help bypass a lot of heartburn on your part and my part in getting the product that you want in this case. And so, one of the last things I purchased in my last city was a gunshot detection system, which you don't see bid often. But it's a common tool now in many more metro areas. And those people aren't selling those to the private companies of the world. They're not selling to Toyota or Ford. They're selling to the city of, the county of. And if you're in the market for it yourself, ask that question. Ask the sales rep, who else have you sold to that I can use it for?
Yeah, I think that's also a great point. One of the lesser known secrets sometimes among departments and vendors is if they have sold before, they might actually already have a contract that you can use. Maybe it's not a cooperative, or they're not yet familiar with that option, but it's just an RFP that they were awarded by a neighboring agency that happens to include that shareable language. I feel like I'm a broken record there, speaking with suppliers a lot of times too, being like, hey, you actually already have a contract, or the reason this agency is reaching out to you is they found this contract and it has that language, and so it means you can sell. So I feel like it's something they celebrate, but it feels like a secret still, or something that folks aren't as aware of as they hopefully will be in the years to come.
Well, and something that happens organically in that discussion with those sales reps is, hey, we're looking for this because of the following reasons. Once that sales rep understands the use of that contract or reuse of that contract, then allows them to get more doors open with other agencies. Hey, I've got a contract that you can use yourself. I used to train back in my first early days of being a purchasing agent for a school district, the brand new copier reps that would come through. And I worked for a tiny little school district just north of Los Angeles. And I would always say, great, can you give me the LA Unified price? And they would scratch their head and go, well, what do you mean? And you'd give them the quick overview on what piggybacking, cooperative purchasing looked like. And I would encourage them, next time you go to a public agency, point out, hey, I've got a large contract that you can use. And oh, by the way, this is who I represent.
Yeah.
Whether it be Xerox, Canon, whomever. I was less interested in the brand and more interested in the solution on how to get to their brand.
Yeah, makes sense. Awesome. So, okay, we've talked a little bit about how you identify the right sourcing path within your agency, and curious, once you've identified that path, how you then get buy-in from your departments, especially if they're skeptical or in a hurry. So, Dan, maybe we'll start with you.
Well, the buy-in in the case of a cooperative or reuse of contract, again, is that predictability. You know who the supplier is from the get-go, or you have at least you have a menu of choices, and perhaps, we all have clients, and we jokingly ask, well, gee, are they brand specific? Yeah, of course they are. They know what they want when they show up at purchasing a store. And so if you can help get them to that brand a little bit quicker, they're going to appreciate that speed button, that easy button, whatever you want to call it, that gets them closer to that supplier, hopefully without, the long time of a mysterious bidding process to them. And again, predictability price, predictability supply. The supplier appreciates it because they're going to see business much faster rather than waiting to see where they line up. And that buy-in, that solution, getting them quicker to a solution generates the buy-in automatically.
Yeah. So explaining, hey, this is going to be faster. April, how about you? What are some of the tactics that you have found to be successful here?
So I think they have to understand the why behind why we're making their life so miserable. And once they understand, how do they understand that? They have to receive training, right? So the training is constant in my organization. We used to do boring hour-long. We called it the purchasing pointers, and it was the same training over and over again for years and years until finally we decided, that wasn't really effective. People were snoozing, just because it wasn't really that important to them, right? So what we did is we broke it up into, I call it my Procurement Palooza training series. And this year we've done one training a month in the Procurement Palooza series about specific procurement related topics. Technology purchases is one. Software purchases we just did last month. Food and catering, that's a huge one, right? So that was a whole one by itself. Marketplace purchases on your Amazon, that kind of thing. That was a whole other separate one. So trying to make it fun, trying to make it memorable. So at least if they take away 2 to 3 tidbits of information about that, then hey, they learned something versus trying to force them to sit through this hour long, every few months when it's really the same thing over and over again. And then if those trainings are in person, I bring food. You always bring food to in-person meetings, right? I bring swag. So we attend these events where we've got vendors, giving us all sorts of things, pens, notepads, that kind of thing. Bring those out to those training workshops. Give them to your end users. I may have plenty of notepads. They may really appreciate a new notepad, something like that. But really kind of making them understand the why behind it is being good stewards of taxpayer dollars, and then training them up and making sure that they want to call us. That they learn that, hey, oh, I remember something in the training about this. I don't quite remember what it is. I'm going to call April just to double check what that was. But then we also record them and we keep them up on our intranet site so that if we do have a new person let's say, come in and maybe that's going to be entering requisitions, and then they have a purchase for catering. We say, okay, here's 30 minutes of a training. Why don't you watch this and then give us a call after that if you have more questions. So
Yeah, I love that. I do feel like in an age of such limited attention spans, being able to make it edutainment, entertaining, fun, interactive. And April's team put together some really fun trainings. We got a chance to look at one that was Three's Company themed that had some really fun nods to pop culture while also being very on theme around like why you got to get three quotes and how to do that. So hit up April for some inspiration on how to provide entertaining and informative training to your departments. Awesome. Jen, what about you? How have you kind of looked to get buy-in from departments, especially when they're maybe coming in already with this perception of procurement's just going to shut me down?
Yeah, so definitely like April, we try to focus on training and make it fun, have food. We've been hosting an open houses in procurement month and, offering free lunch, free, snacks, whatever that entails. But one of the things that we did when I first rolled out that was very helpful during procurement month, we did a meet the staff, and it was an online event, online training, but we actually just introduced all of the staff through a PowerPoint through a game of guessing. And we said, like, here's their favorite movie, here's their favorite TV show, here's their favorite cartoon character. You guess who it might be, who you think. And we gave them a list of everybody's names. And then at the end, we gave away like a gift card to like the top three who got the most answers correct. And it really like humanized our staff. And so it was really exciting to see the departments actually start to connect with the staff, to be able to reach out to them, to not be so afraid of, oh, I'm going to get my hand slapped because I did something wrong or I didn't go through. And it made that connection easier to start with us instead of waiting to have procurement come in and clean things up. So that was really helpful and remove some of the skepticism from reaching out to procurement.
Yeah, reminder, we're not the hammers. We don't want to be the hammers. We're humans too. And we have names and faces and kids and pets and hobbies. Building those relationships is so helpful.
I want to highlight the power of food there because everyone talked about food. I've always been the believer that purchasing should be one of the best networks organizations in any city or government organization. One of the things that I did in my office was actually hosted a daily snack buffet. It was bagged snack foods, pretzels, popcorn, cookies, etc. At one time, I remember I had 6 variety of Oreos out there, and it was hilarious how many people just casually drop by, pretend to ask a question, but it was all guys to get to the food. But even so, that conversation, that friendly little quickie one-off for 30 seconds was enough to get buy-in that, hey, purchasing isn't such a bad group to talk to.
Dan, I'm just imagining like the bird feeder, the human bird feeder equivalent of like, you put out your little snacks and you kind of watch who pops up and stays at your windowsill for a
Absolutely.
couple minutes. That's great. Well, Dan, another question for you. So I think we've heard a little bit about this tension that procurement teams face of obviously we have to train and at least share the why. But we also can't always expect departments to retain all of the expertise that we have when it comes to compliance. And cooperative purchasing is one of those things where we've seen some public agencies take the perspective of, hey, we're going to educate our departments. All my departments are going to know what cooperative contracts are. They're going to go seek them out. They're going to be fluent in how to ask vendors about them and how to work with our procurement team on them. And then I think we see others that say, oh, I don't even kind of try to explain cooperative purchasing to my departments. All they need to know is ask the magic word and then hand it over. And that's kind of enough. So curious what approach you've seen work best and either from your experience before or obviously to now with your work at Sourcewell, having kind of a picture across different agencies.
Well, I think approaching it from the Sourcewell side is more interesting and a peek behind the curtain because we attend a lot of shows. And if we get out in front of procurement audiences, most public procurement team members have at least heard of Sourcewell, have a vague understanding or better than vague understanding of what cooperative purchasing looks like or piggybacking or joining or whatever it is. It gets more interesting when we get out to what we call industry shows. That is, we're getting in front of firefighters or, fleet professionals or police chiefs, any of those sort of things. And our messaging is very much the same. We've got contracts that'll help you get to your products quicker, more efficiently, more predictably. But then the training discussion is, all right, these contracts exist, Mr. Parks Director, to go buy the playground equipment that you want to do. You still have to have that conversation with your purchasing team. You still have to figure out what their process is, and they may not be totally hip understanding or even embracing a cooperative contract. And so there's a negotiation that occurs. And so that dialogue between our team that is talking to government accounts and those different users out there gets switched up a little bit because they still need to negotiate, for lack of a better term, with the purchasing department on what the rules are internal to that agency. And so it's very individualized, I guess is what I'm getting to here. I've got a worldview from 25 years in the job, but I am also much more aware now these days that how I function in my agency is not how the agency next door did. And so our messaging tends to be very individualized. It has to be. It's amazing out there the breadth of understanding of cooperatives. One end that totally embraces it, using April as an example, where that's their starting point, where others are like, well, maybe not, or they've got an attorney, a legal counsel on site that doesn't like that process. It is totally universal. I've gotten phone calls while working at Sourcewell from someone that ran a state purchasing office, and the phrasing this person used was, "How dare you market directly to my public safety team?" Because they didn't want them aware of these potential solutions, because then they had to explain away, well, no, this is why you've got to follow mine. And it puts you in a weird situation, truthfully, because we want to market to all levels. We want to offer solutions to those police and fire chiefs, to the parks directors, the public works directors. It's an avenue for you to explore and to talk up in your agency. We never say you are guaranteed to, guarantee this will work or guarantee this satisfies all your legal requirements. They still have to do their due diligence. They still have to talk to their purchasing teams. But we're offering the solutions to all levels across every organization that we can.
Yeah, that resonates. I think there's this tension we hear working with the supplier community as well of, hey, sometimes, this backfired. Like I really sold the department my champion on this one contract, and then procurement, for whatever reason, like rejected that contract, and it kind of eroded this trust of using cooperative contracts, or that procurement is a partner. I think the procurement perspective, and April, Jen, feel free to chime in here too, would be like yet another reason to just come to us earlier, engage us at the beginning. And also one of the things that inspired the tools that we're building of like, cool, how do you kind of set the table, create the scaffolding? So if there are certain cooperatives that you can't use for compliance reasons or preferences that the procurement team might have, that you're not even showing those as available to your departments, that you're only kind of curating stuff that's going to be an automatic yes from the procurement team. So you don't, again, have to say, oh yeah, we told you we could use that, but not in this special case for reasons that are hard to explain or for you to follow. Great. Okay. So last question, and then we'll open it up to audience questions and some final thoughts. Curious about the tools and tactics that have overall had the biggest impact for you on helping departments navigate sourcing decisions on their own. And again, I think this is another area where there's a spectrum where it feels like some agencies really want to get their departments to do more, to take on more of the work, to drive sourcing, to drive getting quotes, et cetera. And others might be much more hesitant about, it feels like giving away the keys to the car, right? It can be a little scary to kind of put the departments in the driver's seat in that way. I was actually talking to someone, I'm based in the Bay Area, so we have these Waymos, these robot taxis all around. And I was like, okay, what you want is the robo car. Like you want to drive, you want to be like, we'll get you to the destination. There's limited control that you department can have. So we were kind of laughing about that, where it's like, that sounds like the perfect compromise. Anyway, all that to say, curious about the tools and tactics that have been most meaningful for you. And I think April will kick it off with you.
I love that analogy. We need to give our end users the Waymo car.
Exactly. Yeah,
That's
the Waymo.
great. I'm going to steal that one. That's awesome. I think we talked a lot about trainings already. They need tools, right? They need the end users. Again, they are not experts in procurement. That's our job, right? And so if I'm willing to give them tools to make it just simplified for them, checklists. We love checklists here. Electronic ones. PDF ones, we laminate them. I send them out in interoffice mail with chocolate. If you're in a crunch and I put a little crunch bar on there, use this checklist, trying to just promote the usage of them because it will make their life easier if they just use it. Um, but and also just being a resource, being available, because you know, most folks, I have probably some people that only make one or two purchases a year. Like I can't expect them not to have issues with that every single time because I only talk to them twice a year. So, having some grace there, making sure that we're not being, or expressing feelings of frustration when we get the same call from the same person over and over and over again, and just having grace and promoting those checklists and those tools. Pavilion has been an amazing tool rolling out. And I was very, very careful as we rolled this out. I think we must have piloted and tested Pavilion for at least 3-4 months. I think kind of going back to the last question about the reputations, right? I feel like it's my job to not to protect the reputation of my department, but my vendors, my suppliers, my cooperatives, my Pavilion. I don't know. I mean, just because I want to make sure that if the word gets out that something isn't good, it will spread like wildfire. So I want to make sure that I'm there defending all of those entities to make sure that when we roll something out, the checklist, we've tested it. When we've rolled out Pavilion, we've tested it and we're experts in it. So when those questions come in, I can be a resource and say, hey, yes, oh, you tried using Pavilion and you got stuck here. Oh, do this, do that. And then that will, help you through the problem, or just ask with Pavilion as well.
We loved that, by the way. We learned a ton from the feedback that you all were sharing as you were building it, and so helpful to also get some of that feedback from your end users as well, because we don't know what we don't know. We can kind of only live in our own body, and it's hard to remember what we don't know when we spend so much time kind of steeped in this world. To step into kind of new, see it with fresh eyes is helpful. So hopefully your organization benefited. I know the thousands of other agencies that use Pavilion also benefited, I think, from you guys poking and prodding a bit more and sharing that feedback. So we love that. Jen, how about you? What's had the biggest impact in your experience?
Well, like April said, we having those tools available, but the tools have to be user friendly, right? Like if the tool makes sense to procurement and it's very procurement driven, is the end user going to understand what they're using the tool for? So having that, making sure that that tool is easy for them to navigate, easy to find. I will say when I started here, our website, our internal intranet procurement website was a mess. You couldn't find anything. And my staff were very frustrated. They're like, well, they're sending the wrong documents. And I'm like, you guys, I know what I'm looking for and I can't even find it. So we completely revamped our website. We created some decision trees that were really helpful, got them to the right documents, the right places. That was not only helpful to the end user, but to us. So when we rolled out the Pavilion tool, it was super beneficial to us. When Pavilion approached me and said, hey, we're working on this tool. Do you want to, try it out? And I said, yes, let me get my team involved and see what they think, because they'll be the ones that have to maintain it. And after we got off the call, they were like, this seems like an obvious moment of duh, yes, we want this tool. How do we get it? And so we rolled it out. And when we rolled it out to our end users, we did a big online training, and our chat was just like, this is amazing. How do we, where are we going to find this? This is cool. How do we use it now? And it was like, you can use it now. It's available on our website. Here's the link. Please start using it. And we've seen an uptick of people who are a little bit more compliant with their cooperative purchasing, or if they need to get quotes, going out and getting those quotes through that website. And people have stopped by, just like Dan said, to pick up the snacks, but to also be like, oh, well, I had a question about, this tool, and I didn't see this, or I didn't see that. And we've said, it's not an all-inclusive, but definitely use it as a great starting point. And then if you still need more, reach out to us, but definitely use this as a good starting point to get you going. And that has been a huge help for our department.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that that like the takeaway for me is like have the snacks and the tool together. Like we need the swag and the snacks and the tool. No, it's great. I think the user friendliness is another piece too. It's something we've learned a lot about because what departments are looking for is a different set of information than what we're looking for on procurement. And we have to satisfy both, but it's a lot of information. So how do you kind of give the right information just in time to the right stakeholder while behind the scenes making sure that all the bases are covered and that that decision tree has kind of been built in to the experience, even if your users don't necessarily realize it. I think the other thing you mentioned, which I love, Jen, is like, how do we just get love from our departments? I think a lot of us kind of sit in these meetings like a lot of the time where folks are kind of complaining or something's gone wrong and we're fixing something. And it is so nice. I don't know about you, but it literally like makes me like my cheeks hurt from smiling just to like get all that love from departments where I'm like, wow, that was so easy or that was so fast. Thank you so much. And it just builds like a positive feedback loop as well to be like, wow, procurement's working really hard to like make this easier for me. So and I think April, we saw that with you and all the testing that you did kind of paying off. It's like, wow, like they're really working hard to make sure this is configured, it's set up. We're going to have an easy experience. So I think that's been a cool thing about seeing getting some of these tools built and tested as well. And then Dan, what's been your approach? I know you have a different perspective to
Well,
add. Well,
I just wanted to say that, someone expressed fear about letting go, about you may have a fully centralized department now, and then you feel like you're giving away some of that authority if you're giving away these sourcing tools and that sort of thing. But in my mind, you need to leverage that eagerness that you have from your clients. They want to see things done quicker, so they get their product quicker. And so if you can say, all right, great, you can help me with the quoting process. You can get me 3 reasonable quotes. This is how I want them. Purchasing still retains that last right of refusal because in most organizations, purchasing is the last approver in the transaction before a PO is generated or contract is signed, whatever. You will still have the chance to review their work, but set them loose. Let them go chase quotes if they want to, if they've got the time. And then along the way, you can teach them about true apples to apples quotes. Look, you're not quoting the same thing or you're being too restrictive, whatever it may be, but you're freeing up your own time of, going out there and getting simple quotes. In my shop where I was reduced by my team was reduced by 75%, I had to choose which bids I had to do. Everything else I wanted to pass along to the departments as best I could. And so it was quickly training them and pointing out that by them doing this work, it would get into their solutions quicker.
awesome. Great. So I'm seeing that we have a bunch of questions coming in. So I want to actually just go ahead and jump to make sure we have time to do some of that Q&A. I see a couple. Let's see. It looks like James asked, how do you handle when a department wants to use Pavilion instead of a requirements contract that you already have procured or have something in place? So it sounds like there's this tension of, hey, if we always are saying go out and get a cooperative contract, what about our own existing awarded contracts and how do we handle that situation? Jen, April, I don't know if this has come up within your organization and you want to speak to it. I'm also happy to speak to it if you'd like. Not yet. Okay, so James, we actually typically work with the organization to add your own awarded contracts into Pavilion. And in fact, if you use tools like OpenGov or Bonfire, and we're working on a few others. We're going to launch with Beacon soon. We integrate. So if you have your contracts stored somewhere, we can pull those in and update them. And we automatically, if you want, if your procurement team decides to do this, we can automatically surface those contracts first. So in the Pavilion experience, if your department user is searching for something and you prefer that they use an existing awarded contract that your agency already has in place, we will default to show them those things on top and remind them that that exists before they go out and consider new cooperative contracts or new vendors outside of that pool. So we have that kind of preference built in. We can also make it a harder requirement if that's something that you really want to like be forceful about. We see most agencies, the preference kind of comes down to making sure that it's surfaced, that those contract vehicles, those existing awarded suppliers are preferenced heavily in results for departments before they're going out and selecting something new. Okay.
I'll just add to that. We
Please.
did do that preference. And the other thing that we do is we remind them that the vendor competed for that business. if it was our own solicitation. And so we want to be fair to that vendor, just like in return, we want them to be fair to us. So that's one of the other pieces that we use.
Yeah, I think this also goes back to some education too of like, hey, if this is already a vendor on contract, that's going to be the very fastest option, right? Like the contract's in place, we can already work with them, they're in our system, we have a relationship. Cooperative contract might be the second fastest. We just got to confirm that it works for us, et cetera. But that's also why we tend to bias those in the results if the procurement team has selected that and to share those agreements on Pavilion. Okay, I see a note from Daniel that says, we have a big push to use local businesses whenever possible. How are we thinking about helping to identify results that might be somewhat local to the user? And maybe Jen or April, to the extent that this comes up for you all, or Dan, you have experience too. I know this comes up a lot of times with cooperative contracts, like, hey, can we use cooperative contracts for local? I think, Daniel, to answer your specific question about Pavilion's product capabilities, we actually do have a filter that allows you to restrict results based on geographic distance of the supplier. And we're working on improving that data so we can show headquarters and then also from like branch offices as well. So depending on how you think about that, but oftentimes we see it as not just local from like a credentialing standpoint, but also from a department user standpoint. Hey, if this supplier is close to me, maybe it will be faster, delivery. Maybe it's something I'm going to need on an ongoing basis. I have a preference to work with someone that's kind of closer by, so I can have a more ongoing relationship. So we see it come up there, even for organizations that don't have a local, preference that's built into their procurement process.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that when we do our solicitations at Sourcewell, we try to award the contracts at the manufacturer level, at the corporate level. So think Caterpillar, John Deere, those sort of things. But it's done with the intention that all of their local dealers can access those contracts. So if you have a local cat dealer in your town, they should be able to access that contract and make sales against that contract in the same way the manufacturer can. So the local dealer, your local tractor dealer that's selling multiple lines, can point to that cat contract, still have a Sourcewell, a cooperatively available contract that you can use. They will still get the business because you're writing the PO to that local dealer, not the manufacturer necessarily. The challenge that we have is the sales teams at those dealers aren't always well informed. We do our best. We have a whole team that does nothing but train dealers on how to market Sourcewell contracts to government agencies. But those sales staffs are also the ones that tend to churn the most. And so you've got new salespeople all the time that are calling on government that may not have no preconception of what a cooperative agreement looks like. Yeah. And so sometimes you're training them, sometimes it's the other way around, but it is available to you. So I use tractors as an example, but even all the way down to copier equipment. We've got contracts with Canon, but the local Canon dealer may not even be aware of what a cooperative looks like. And so it may be a conversation, but we can help you through that.
Yeah, that's something we've seen a lot as well, where there is someone local that you can work with, but it's sometimes hard to identify them. So that's something we're working on too, of like, how do you pull out, oh, it's that local office or that local vendor that's actually working under this umbrella kind of contract or award. And it would take a lot of digging to kind of figure that out, or a few conversations. How do we kind of extract that information?
Real quick, just
please.
On that point. When we started with Pavilion, we actually realized that a lot of our local vendors weren't set up on Pavilion yet. So having the ability for my end users as well as my staff to go in and add vendors to Pavilion, what has been an incredibly useful tool.
Yeah, I was about to say, actually, there was a question that just came in that said, how do you compile the list of vendors? Do they have to sign up? How are they included? I did want to put this up in the background as we continue, because I know some folks will have to drop, but we'd love to help. Again, these tools that we've built, Jen and April and their teams have been part of shaping, building them. We've created them with several dozen agencies across the country, and now they're available for everyone to use, and they're totally free. So you can sign up at that link if you'd like some more information or want to learn how to make the most, or even to do a training. Ours might not be as fun as April's, but we're happy to kind of jump in and provide some support and trainings as well if your organization is interested. I did want to let April, you sort of speak to, you already kind of did, around like, how do you compile a list of vendors? They have to sign up with Pavilion to be included. On the Pavilion side, we pull in information about vendors from all of the cooperative contracts that we have in our database, all of the non-cooperative contracts that we get from local agencies and state entities, and then lists of registered vendors from different states and entities. So we already are working with a fairly large, more than 300,000 vendors today. But as we partner with more agencies, they're also starting to add their vendors in as well. So April, I know you kind of spoke to that as well, of like, hey, getting folks to sign up. Yeah. And it's free to be listed and to receive business for suppliers as well. Pavilion generates revenue and sustains its operations as a business by offering a premium upsell to suppliers. But it's a utility-based model. So it's a very sort of egalitarian approach to how vendors get access to the digital marketplace, meaning you get the same kind of experience whether you're getting only a few kind of leads and a little bit of engagement a year as a small vendor, or a ton because you're like a big national vendor. Okay. Well, we're at time. We're in fact a couple minutes over. I want to say a huge thank you to our panelists. Thank you so much for joining us, to the Sourcewell team for co-hosting this event, and then to all of you for spending an hour of your morning or your afternoon participating in this conversation, participating in the discussion, and engaging with us to continue driving the profession forward. We really appreciate all of your time and effort today. So thank you so much, and we will be sharing a recording of this presentation and slides after the fact. Hope you have a good week ahead, and see you next time.